Hello and welcome to Women Veterans Alliance, our Wednesday webinar. And I want to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Maria, who's going to talk about why movement in menopause is so important. And it's going to be a great conversation, but I want to read her bio. She's a fitness expert, health science professor, education content developer, menopause expert, and busy mother passionate about sharing knowledge and helping women lead healthier, happier lives. After serving in the United States Air Force, where she served as a fitness program manager, she pursued her PhD in health sciences and conducted a research study on the effects of physical activity on the quality of life through the menopausal transition. With 20 years of hands-on fitness experience and over 10 years of focusing on menopause, she brings extensive knowledge to all aspects of fitness and menopause, specifically as it relates to quality of life. She's the founder of Fitness in Menopause, a company dedicated to helping women navigate the challenges and rewards of menopause. She holds both graduate and postgraduate degrees in health sciences and certifications as Certified Health Education Specialist, ACE Certified Professional Trainer, and ACE Fitness Nutrition Specialist. Her course, Menopausal Fitness Training the Menopausal Client, is a NASM, AFAA, and ACE accredited continuing education course for fitness professionals. She teaches at the College of Health and Human Services at Trident University International and is a freelance writer and content developer for companies interested in helping the menopausal communities. So without further ado, Dr. Maria, I'm going to go ahead and let you take it from there. Thank you so much. You're definitely qualified to speak on this topic.
I have a little experience. I'm super happy to be here. So I can talk about menopause all day long and never get tired of it. So I'm always happy to participate in these things. So because I was talking to you before then, I thought about having some PowerPoint slides, but I feel like we've all been in the military and have been stoned to death with PowerPoints. And I like my webinars to be a little bit more free-flowing and less rigid. I'm going to start by just sharing some of the pain points that I have had the honor to be exposed to from other women in regards to what their experiences through menopause, and then talk a little bit about my experience and what I have found to be helpful through the transition. I want to open this up, though, for questions for anybody that's attending. If you have a specific question that you would like to be addressed or seen answered here, if I have the answer, I'll be happy to share it. If I don't, I'll be happy to find it and then email you later or contact you later. So feel free to write in the chat box or raise your hand with any of the questions that you may have. So I'm just going to start out. I think the focus of the webinar today is going to be movement, the importance of movement through menopause. And there's been an overload of information about what should be done, what is best for menopause during the transition. Are there any exercises that are more beneficial than others? And if you listen to what's out there, it is all contradictive. It is saying you should do a high intensity exercise for the belly fat stuff, but you should not do too high intensity because then your cortisol increases. But don't forget to do yoga for the meditation aspect and the lowering of the stress levels. So if you listen to all of that, you should be doing 4 hours of activities all day, and then hopefully you get everything under control. Now, my approach to movement has changed a little bit over the last few years because I've been lucky to be surrounded by women that share their experiences with me, and because I've only worked with menopausal women over the last 10 years. And what I have found mostly is that once we stop the noise of what's been thrown at us and what's been sold to us, because that is the key word, as menopause becomes a bigger market, it is projected to be a $60 billion market in the next 3 to 5 years. Everyone wants a piece of the pie. So you'll be bombarded with sales of products and methods and things that will help you hack your system, and they promise to solve all of your menopause problems. And in the end, it is just a marketing technique like we've seen for any of the other things that we've experienced through life. So my first tip is to stop the noise, stop listening to a lot of these things, say no on social media. Obviously, the more people you follow in menopause, the more advertisements you get. So try to clean out those things. But I want you to try to go back to what you already know about yourself, because we haven't gotten to the stage in our life without learning things about ourselves. I bet that half of us have been on all the diet trends, all the fitness fads that we've experienced over the last, we're all in our late 40s, 50s. And have they worked? Did we have fun doing them? In essence, during menopause, there are big changes, but can we control those changes with exercise and movement? And the simple answer is no. Can we mitigate some of the symptoms? For sure. Does it work for everyone? No, just like anything else. So my approach to fitness and movement has a lot to do with self-exploration, of trying to figure out which types of movements, first of all, you enjoy, and secondly, that you're sustainably can continue doing forever as it goes. So we know a few things about exercise in menopause. We know that, for instance, high intensity interval training, so your very high intensity workouts, a lot of times they're talked about like Tabata workouts, if anybody knows. They're like short sprint intervals followed by rest by other short sprint intervals of different exercises. They have been shown to be fairly successful in managing some of the fat deposits. So a lot of times women complain about the belly fat that seems to magically appear overnight. But does it work for everyone? Again, it doesn't. And it is important to say that high intensity intervals can also exacerbate some other symptoms. So we're looking at hot flashes or night sweats. So those symptoms where you already have those bouts of heat, high intensity interval can exacerbate those. Working out late at night can also exacerbate a rougher sleep with more night sweats at night. So it becomes a fine balance of figuring out which symptom you may want to address more, and then targeting some of the exercises towards those symptoms. But being also very aware that, like I mentioned, high intensity interval training can be very beneficial from a mental perspective. I am a fast and furious kind of girl, so I enjoy high intensity intervals, but they do make me have more hot flashes. I take into consideration that I like those types of workouts, and I get a lot out of them from a physical perspective and from a mental perspective. So I take the hot flashes as like a side effect. For me, that is a trade-off that I will accept. That said, if someone already has hot flashes left and right, and it's already bad enough, and they don't really enjoy high intensity interval training to begin with, that might not be the first thing that I would suggest they would do. And so those are kind of the things that we need to explore when we look at what does movement do during menopause. One thing we know for sure, movement will help you have a better experience. No matter how you look at it, movement and exercise are helpful for everyday life and everyday health improvements for the general population, and that does not change during menopause. So that we have to acknowledge. The more you move, the better you will feel. What that type of movement will be something that you will have to decide. We know that walking is very beneficial from a mental health perspective. It has been correlated to better outcomes in depression and anxiety. Doesn't have the high intensity aspect of it, so maybe it won't do all that much for your belly fat, but none of the other ones might also not do something for it. So we have to also work on setting realistic goals around menopause and what we can achieve. As I mentioned earlier, when we stop listening to what we're being sold, the illusion that we can control this transition somehow by spending money on someone's method that supposedly is based on science, but no one knows what the science is, or take supplements that are supposed to help you with all of the symptoms because it's research, but again, the research no one shares, so we don't know where that came from. When we stop listening to those and we really start thinking about, first of all, what are the symptoms that are bothering me the most? Some women, I would say most women, have 2 or 3, even sometimes just 1, but generally 2 or 3 symptoms that bother them the most, that are most, that affect their quality of life most during the transition. We should talk about those. We should isolate those and say, okay, what can we do to maybe address number 1? So if depression or anxiety is one of your major symptoms, we do know that exercise such as walking or more moderate intensity exercises tend to have a better impact to it. Yoga and meditation also have a good impact on that. So that might be a first line of defense when we're talking about that. If someone is mostly concerned about their strength or their body image, strength training and high intensity interval training have been shown to be very beneficial for those things. So we're looking at those parts. In the end, we're creating somewhat of a puzzle that we're piecing together. And that's how I work with clients when I work with them on trying to just figure out what is number 1 that's bothering you, because we cannot address all of the symptoms at once. It's impossible. It's like going to your doctor and saying, I have XYZ and I want 1 pill to solve them all. That won't happen, but you might walk away with a whole cabinet full of different pills and powders, and you will take those as needed for the different things. So that's how I look as well on how we introduce movement and create a sustainable routine during menopause. So knowing which parts may be more beneficial for you and then using them when you have those symptoms. Because one of the things, and I might take a step back here, because I think we were talking a little bit before, and Virginia was mentioning that we just want to learn a little bit more about menopause itself and the transition itself, and correct me if I'm wrong. But when we take a step back, when we go through the menopausal transition, there's often a misconception that menopause starts or that perimenopause starts when our periods start changing. So skipping periods, erratic periods, that kind of thing. That's when most women associate symptoms, or not symptoms, maybe that they think, okay, this is where menopause starts, where my transition starts. And that's wrong. That your periods are not an indicator for perimenopause. It's not an indicator. There's a lot of women that are in perimenopause that have a regular period. Also, there are a lot of women that don't have periods, either because of birth control or because they've had hysterectomies or other issues that causes them not to have periods. So that way to detect menopause doesn't exist for them anyway. But it is also not a reliable determinant of menopause. What is a determinant is when people start feeling symptoms. The problem with that is that we often, I'd say 90% of women do not know that some symptoms that they start experiencing are actually symptoms of perimenopause, such as anxiety, an increase in anxiety, or a start of anxiety. So my first symptom of perimenopause was heavy, anxiety episodes. I've never had anxiety in my life. I've never had any mental health issues that I know of. And I studied this. I know a lot about menopause. I've worked with menopausal women, and it still caught me by surprise. So when that happened to me, it really was a little bit of a wake-up call to saying it doesn't really matter how educated you are. It doesn't matter how healthy you are or how healthy you perceive you are, how fit you are. Symptoms don't follow a pattern that is kind of linear. If X, Y, Z, if you've done this, that, and that, and you've taken care of yourself, then your menopause experience will be easier than everyone else's that is maybe unhealthy and overweight and has already mental health issues. They will have a harder time. That just doesn't work that way. No one really knows what their menopause experience will be like. And so it is important that we talk about how to detect some of these symptoms, or at least connect the dots that this could be a menopause related symptom. So some women start feeling maybe mood changes. Those are often described. I just don't know what's going on with myself. I just feel like I'm so erratic, or I snap at people and I feel low. Sometimes I just wake up and I want to go in the closet and cry, like those kinds of things, but they never feel that that is a connection between perimenopause and that, because their periods are still the same. And we need to have those conversations to say, well, no, this could be a transitional period where now your hormones are fluctuating and we're losing some of that estrogen, which we have relied on our entire time. So we're seeing some of that drop. The problem with the hormonal change is also that it isn't a steady drop that you just start over here and then it keeps dropping and eventually you end at that end point wherever you level out. Menopause is more like this. It's a mountain like this, and then you loop around. It's a dizzying roller coaster. You go this way, and then you come back, and then just when you think you're done, it does one more big loop, make you dizzy, and then maybe you're done. That's the problem, because it is, I do call it the menopausal roller coaster. I'm fully boarded on it myself, and you just don't know what's going to happen. Not to say I don't like to scare people, because that doesn't serve a purpose, but I think it is important to be aware that we can't control what symptoms we might have, we might get. So there's no purpose in stressing out over what may come or what maybe not come. What we can do is kind of live more in the moment and say, okay, where am I at now? Is it really bothering me? Can I get help for that? And that's another question. There might be some issues such as mental health issues, depression and anxiety, where you can get help from a mental health professional, and you might end up taking anti-anxiety or antidepressants for a period of time. And it's important to note that when you look at menopause as a transition, it is much easier to, at least I have experienced that it's much easier for women to get help, thinking that it isn't something that they're just committing to full. Like, I don't want to get on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications because that's just not who I am, and I think I can power through. But just know that it doesn't mean that you're going to be on them forever. It means that it might help you go through the transition and address an imbalance that you have there now, or a change in hormonal balance just for that period. It could be couple of weeks, it could be a couple months, could be a couple of years. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, it could be, but it also could just be a couple of months, and then it happens, and then you feel better, and you might be able to go off of them. For me, and I'm very open about my experience because that's really the only way we can share. I got help for my anxiety, and I ended up getting a very low level dose of anxiety medications, and I don't use them anymore, but I did need them then. And I'm grateful that I had the knowledge to go to my doctor and say, hey, here's what's going on. I think I need some help to just make it through here, because I'm already doing all of the things that I know I'm supposed to be doing, but I cannot get my head around what's happening. And I do still have them. And I think having the help also creates a little bit of what's the word, a backup plan. It makes you feel a little bit more secure to know that if something happens, you can reach out and grab it. And so having those types of conversations are really, really important. Some of the main, mostly known symptoms of menopause are hot flashes and night sweats and mood changes, like those are the biggest ones. Insomnia is another one that's a really big one. And the lesser known ones are such as issues with vaginal dryness or sex, or increased UTIs, hair loss, thinning hair, more hair on the chin or anywhere. So less hair where you want it and more hair where you don't want it. Drying skin overall, like those kinds of things, itchy skin, itchy ears. I would say if you're in that drop zone of menopause, which I consider kind of like mid 40s to early 50s, I assume I always want to say if there are any big changes in your life, physically and mentally, there's a big chance that it could be correlated with your perimenopausal transition, even if you until then did not think that you were in perimenopause. And same for physical activity. I think about 95% of women that reach out to me start by saying, I've done all the things that I think I'm supposed to be doing. I cannot control my weight gain. I have this belly fat. Nothing seems to work anymore. I've been active my entire life. I've read all the books. I've done all the courses, and I still can't change how I look. Mostly it's a body image and physical changes that really are disturbing, because it's almost like an identity crisis, because what we know worked before. So I said, if I did this XYZ before, then this would come out, right? I was always able to lose weight, and that's generally what happens. When I gained some weight, I did this, and then I was able to lose weight, and that just doesn't work anymore. Now, what do we do to create a sustainable way to move? Step number one is to disassociate exercise and movement with weight loss. That is number one. If we can't get past that association that I'm working out and then I'm going to lose weight or I'm going to lose fat, then it's not going to be sustainable, and it's definitely not going to be fun, and it is not realistic. And when it comes down to it, we end up with unrealistic expectations that lead us to fail. And the more failure we have, the less motivated we are to try new things. So as Melissa said in my intro, my biggest focus when studying how physical activity impacts menopausal women, it was that the focus was quality of life. It was not about weight loss. It wasn't about strength increases. It was just about quality of life, which means different things for different women. I dare to say that although quality of life is such a big topic, being able to function, to lift things, to move around without pain or having balance issues, those things are at the core of anyone's quality of life. I've yet to hear anybody say, you know, I don't really care if I'm able to walk or sit up or get up from my chair. That doesn't impact my quality of life. Never have I heard that, because that's probably not, I don't think anybody feels that way. So being able to be strong and being able to do things and continue on with life and participate in sports as we did, like golfing or tennis or pickleball or running or whatever it is that you've enjoyed doing, or playing with your grandchildren or your children. And those things can be addressed. We can do strength training. We can do training, and we can do workouts and movement that are specific to improve your quality of life from a physical perspective. Can I guarantee that you will lose weight or lose belly fat? Absolutely not. And I also don't make those claims. And anybody that makes those claims is lying. They're selling you something that they can't promise. First of all, if I gave you a workout to do and I said, if you do this, you will lose weight, the belly fat will be gone, I can't control what else you do in your life. So just think about it. So if someone tries to sell you that, just call it like it is. It's a lie. It's a marketing lie. I can guarantee that if I give someone a strength training program and they follow the strength training program, they will get stronger 100%. There's no error here unless they don't do it. Because if you do strength training and you slowly progress and you have a plan, you will get stronger. We can work on bone density, which is a big issue during menopause. So the risk of osteopenia and osteoporosis is very big. So those are the things that I try to get women to focus on, besides those physical changes that we can't really control. I fall into that same boat. I have been fit my entire life. I mean, I have incurred quite a few injuries, as probably a lot of veterans have, but I've always been able to accept my body. I've had my issues with my body image, and I've been very open about it. But this change, I have that belly fat. It comes out of nowhere, it seems, and you are tempted to do those changes, to work out more and eat less, because that's what tended to work before. And that's when it's time to kind of sit down and have some honest conversations with ourselves to say, okay, let's take a step back and see what is important right now. And so a level of self-acceptance and acceptance of your changing body has to happen. And that is the toughest part. The working out and increasing strength part is a simple equation, and I'm saying simple equation, and it's not really, but compared to the body image part of it all, of the acceptance that there's some changes that we're going to experience that are beyond our control, and that is a very hard pill to swallow. So as I mentioned earlier, when we're talking about movement, the one thing that I work on when I talk to clients and women in general is, what is it that you enjoy doing when we're talking from a movement perspective? You don't have to go to the gym. I think a lot of times women see a gym with people in them, with machines, with lots of weights, and that's where they have to go to work out. And that's not true. We can find ways to do it. Resistance training can be done in all sorts of ways. If you are a big gardening fan, lifting those heavy bags of mulch and soil, like that is something that is resistance training. Lifting your grandchildren or children off the ground, resistance training. We have to find ways to make it enjoyable and sustainable. So those are the things that I tend to work with clients when they first come to figure out, how do we change our mindset around menopause and what movement and fitness means during this time. The equations just don't align anymore. So we need to just throw those out and start from scratch a little bit. Once we focus on joy, and once we focus on what it is that we actually want to do, that secondary part of the weight loss or the body changes, it eventually takes a step back. Is it going to completely disappear? Probably not. I am always very honest about body image. It isn't just something that you make your mind up to do. If you follow anybody on social media and you see like that body acceptance movement is a big movement and it's great, but they do make it seem a little bit like you just make up your mind and then tomorrow you wake up and you love your body and that's what you should do. And that's just not a reality. And we need to work on, with all the other stuff, we need to work on having realistic expectations about our movement and about how we feel about our bodies and how we move. So although body image can be managed, I consider my body image issues manageable at this point. I still every day have negative thoughts. It could just be that I sit down in my pants, dig into my belly fat, and for a split second, I'm like, ugh. And then I continue on. It's about not letting it derail you. The thoughts just don't disappear. You don't wake up and then you no longer feel bad about things. But the goal is that you are able to accept that there's really nothing you can do about it. And let me step back here a little bit, because the nothing you can do about it is a big umbrella here. you have to have a realistic conversation with you and an honest conversation with you and say, yeah, are there some things that I can do? Maybe I can move a little bit more. Maybe I haven't been all that great about eating nutritious foods or eating at all or overeating. Those kinds of things where you look at what your life looks like now, and if there are any realistic changes you can make. If you sit down and you're working for 10 hours and you haven't actually done a walk or any kind of purposeful movement in 3 months, then that's something you can change. Will it have a huge impact on how you look, on how your body looks and your body fat percentage or any of those things? I don't know, but that is something, a factor that we can change. So there are some things you can change if those are your circumstances. If you, however, are someone that's already active, you're already doing the things that anyone would tell you to do. You're eating nutritious foods, you're paying attention that you're getting enough sunlight, that you're moving enough, that you're taking breaks between your hours of sitting, and those things, and your body still changes, then you have to be able to say, there's nothing I can do more of to hopefully get a change in that belly fat. And I use belly fat as the symptom because that is 90% of the people that have a complaint. That is the one that they want to fix. So if there's nothing you can change or you're willing to change, then we have to work on self-acceptance. Like, we have to be able to say, this is just where my body has to be right now, and I'm okay with that. I can still move. I can still hike up a mountain. I can go snow skiing. I can ride my bike. All those things that you enjoy doing, you can still do those. If you can't do them, then we need to work on why you can't do them and create a routine, a movement and exercise routine that helps you be able to continue doing the things that add value to your life, such as being able to go on long bike rides, or being able to go on a hike with your family or by yourself, or going on a walk with your dogs, or getting down on the ground and playing with your dogs or your children, grandchildren, like those kinds of things that, again, add a lot of value to your quality of life. Those things we can address. Body image we can address. But what we have to have is a realistic and honest conversation with ourselves about what it is that we're trying to address and what is sustainable and realistic from a change perspective. And those are kind of like the big points when it comes to movement. So if you signed up for this webinar and we're hoping to get a secret to a workout, then I'm sad to report that I don't have any secrets that you can take today and then apply tomorrow, and then your life will change 3 days from now. But the knowledge that I like to share is honest, but it's still applicable. But it does require a lot of self-exploration. You cannot move forward through this stage without taking a deep breath, sitting down, and like taking account and inventory of what's most important to you, why it is important, if there are any things that you can change about it, and have we done any things in the past that we are not doing now that we really enjoyed doing. Let's take account of what we've already experienced in the past. So my advice is always to take a step back rather than a step forward, and trying to find what you already know probably works, but just trusting yourself to make some of those decisions. And again, I'm here, and there's a lot of people like me out there that care, that have the knowledge when it comes to fitness and nutrition and menopause. And people are here to help with the knowledge part if you feel like you need more knowledge of it. But a lot of times we seek so much help from outside sources that we completely disregard what we already know. And how many times, I know I've done this, but many times that I know the answer already, but I need to hear someone else say it before it becomes true. And then I can say, okay, now someone else told me, so it's real. And so we disregard what we already know. And those are kind of like the big things. As I mentioned before, if we're looking at specific exercises, a few of the very basic recommendations, and I have a quick guide that you would be able to download from my website if you want, or I can email it to you afterwards if you haven't, are your big components, we have yoga and meditation, which are great from a mental health perspective, from a stress perspective, from a mobility perspective. There's lots of science to indicate that it really works well to just help you get centered. And again, from a mental health perspective, we're looking at strength training, which is incredibly powerful when it comes to muscle and bone health and mental health as well, and body image. So strength training is at the core of everything I do, because regardless of how you feel about your body from the outside, you do need muscles and strong bones to be able to do all the things that you are able to do. And during menopause, we do lose muscle mass and bone mass at an accelerated rate. So we do need to prioritize that. And that is at the core of any recommendation that I make for women. Strength training has to be a part of it in whatever form that may come. High intensity interval training, which is more that fast and furious kind of training, has been shown to be very beneficial from a metabolic perspective. So if you're looking at body image and maybe physical changes or fat burning, that would be one of the recommendations I would make. But again, with a caveat that it might exacerbate some other symptoms such as hot flashes. I take a step back about the yoga. Hot yoga is probably not a good idea if you're having hot flashes. Not that you would want to go to hot yoga, I think, if you're having hot flashes, but just to note. And the same is with insomnia. Insomnia is a big one. There's a strong correlation between walking and lower to moderate intensity exercise and improvements in sleep. And also working out in the morning versus in the evening when it comes to sleep issues. That said, insomnia is such a big issue that a lot of times you can't just meditate your way out of an insomniac period. It is probably at the top of the issues that I hear from women. And I do feel that when insomnia is an issue, that would be the first issue to address, because no one knows it's the chicken or the egg kind of situation. But if you're not sleeping, then everything else doesn't work right. So sleep could possibly be the trigger for all of the other symptoms. Not to say that it is, but because if you're not sleeping, your metabolism doesn't work well, you can't think, your concentration isn't, you're more irritable. It affects every single thing about your life. So that would be the first thing that I would want someone to target, if we can, with differences in movement or with help from doctors. Another one that is mobility and balance training, which becomes very important if you are at risk for bone fractures. And in menopause, as I mentioned before, as we lose estrogen, we lose muscle mass. Everyone doesn't, regardless of gender, as we age, we do lose muscle mass. But during menopause, we lose it as an accelerated rate. So if you were able to hold on to some muscle before and you were in strength training or resistance training, you will be losing more muscle and strength at an accelerated stage. That is critical for your quality of life. I don't care who it is, if you are less strong, if you're weaker, and you will become weaker if you don't strength train, it will impact how you're able to move and how you're able to function. So that's why that emphasis on strength training, on why it is so important. Muscle is important for your bones as well. And having high impact activities such as jumping or so that bouncing kind of impact is very important for your bone health. Women, postmenopausal women, are at a much higher risk for osteoporosis and fractures. And that is a big one as well. So it has nothing to do with how you look. But if you are diagnosed with osteoporosis or osteopenia earlier in life, your chances of developing to full-blown osteoporosis are very high. You can prevent that, and resistance training and high impact training are the most beneficial ways to work on those. And that's why it is so important. Once you get to osteoporosis, once you're diagnosed with osteoporosis, there's really no going back. So there's no cure for osteoporosis. You can manage it and you can slow down the progression of it. But once you get there, there's no like, oopsie, now what do I need to do to make it go away? You don't. Your bones get to a point where they are weaker and they are at a increased risk for fractures, in which case we need to modify what you do from a workout perspective as well, and from a movement perspective. So as I don't like to fearmonger, bone health and muscle health are something that every woman, hopefully before menopause, take serious and make a part of their routine, or make it a part of their life, and figure out a way to include activities that purposefully help those things. So muscle strength and bone strength and bone mass. So those are kind of like the very big things. I would like to just kind of open up the discussion to see if there are any specific questions. I can ramble on forever in talking about this, but I'd really like to open the conversation to see if there are any specific questions to address.
I think Virginia has a question.
I do. So it was very informative. I like I some of the past presentations I did like 4 or 5 PowerPoints. I do a lot of screenshots so I can remember everything. So and that's something else I'm working on is like brain focus, just trying to, keep my thoughts straight sometimes can be difficult. But can you refer me to like a book or any kind of website or information about I'm trying to deal with multiple issues as far as COVID. I already had asthma, and then I went through 3 rounds of COVID, pneumonia, bronchitis. So like riding a bike, that would be like the ultimate goal. But I'm trying to figure out how to set the little goals to get there, because like I went walking the other day, and we just happened to come across the state park, and I was like, oh, we're not passing up this. I told my husband we need to go, and we did. We just did a little bit of walking and stuff, but we were both out of shape, and he had the last round of COVID. He brought it home to me. So he hadn't done a lot since then too. That's been since December. It's just really hard getting back on the horse per se. And then of course I have some arrhythmia issues. So, it's those baby steps. I tried the yoga, but it's that whole downward dog does not work, but I do well with water, like the water aerobics and things like that. So I'm kind of waiting for the water aerobics and my HOA to start back up, those types of issues. But if you could provide me any information on if there's any research between COVID and menopause, and maybe how people are getting their health back on track, I would really appreciate that.
For sure. So that is first of all, sorry that you went through that. That is a lot to handle. And so asthma, let me ask you something. So asthma, have you suffered from asthma your entire life, or is this COVID related?
No, 2016, I went to work and people kept coming to work sick, and I got really bad with bronchitis. Well, my lungs kept filling up and I could not get into the VA, and nobody had even like suggest go to the ER. That was before community care. And finally my husband got paid and we went to Texas Med Clinic, and it paid everything out of pocket. It was like $100, but at that point so much damage had been done. So no, I've had to work with this because the inhaler has a steroid, and I can't have steroids or caffeine or anything with my arrhythmia. So, it's the compounding issues between the lungs and the heart, and trying to get back on track health wise.
Yeah, and those obviously those are incredibly exacerbating when you're looking at those things. And I just don't think, because COVID is so new, and research in the topic of menopause is so lacking to begin with, because it hasn't really been a priority to worry about women and menopause. And so the research, when it comes down to that, is lacking regardless. But when it comes to menopause and COVID, it is almost non-existent. So when you're looking, and I'm sorry that is kind of like the knowledge, there are some people, and I'd be happy to, if you email me after this, I'd be happy to send you a list of a couple of people that I think are very great to follow, or to not ask, I guess you could ask, but people that are knowledgeable, that are more in the medical provider perspective. There's also the first place that I will send people to look at is the North American Menopause Society, because when you, and it's North NAMS, North American, yeah, and NAMS.org. And there you can look for a menopause practitioner by zip code. So if you put in your zip code, and menopause practitioners are people that have gone through additional training, menopause related, because sadly, a lot of medical professionals are not trained, because menopause is not really a big focus during medical school. And in my experience, sadly, the majority of women that I talk to have been at some point dismissed from their doctors when it comes to menopause. And I know COVID is probably very similar, since it's so new, and people are just dealing with a high level stuff and not really combining anything. But that is a great starting point. So North American Menopause Society is an incredibly valuable source. Do all practitioners that are on that list, are they all great? I don't know, probably not. There's always some questionable ones, but they all had to go through additional training. So it is the best place, I think, to start. And again, it's like, if you email me at maria@fitnessandmenopause.com, I'd be happy to send you a couple of books and just other people that I think are worth not following up, but following, because they have some great information. And one of them is Dr. Jen Gunter. She wrote the Vagina Bible and the Menopause Manifesto, and she has written a couple of things on COVID and menopause. So I think that she's a great person to follow. She has a newsletter called The Vagenda, and it's always fully packed with science and information. So I think that is a great source to follow. And the Menopause Manifesto is a good book. It's like a very thick book about menopause, written from a OBGYN perspective, and she's very knowledgeable. So that would be a great one to go to. But I'll send you a couple of other ones as well. And I'm also more than happy if you wanted to talk with me at a different point in time, for us to specifically talk about what's going on with you and any questions. We can set up something also to just talk, the two of us, if you want, at some point. But I will send you a couple of recommendations of things that I really have enjoyed, and people that I follow for advice, or not advice, but just to stay in the know for things. But to my knowledge, COVID and menopause, we're a long way from trying to figure out or having any science in that regard. And that's kind of sad. I mean, we have very little science when it comes to COVID and the long haul COVID symptoms and what to do about them, right? So we're very far behind on that kind of stuff. From a movement perspective, what you're saying, you're already doing the right thing. You would want to take very tiny baby steps, right? So if the pool is a good place to go. That's where you would start on you can do some weight bearing exercises. They're not on your joints, but you have those like water dumbbells and things that you can use.
Noodles.
It's a great way to work on strength, and swimming as well, building up your cardiovascular capabilities. So that's a great way to start. And then just that tiny baby step of the next step, maybe a tiny little hike or a tiny little bike ride, but never going in a big step, like just always taking that small step and saying, okay, I'm here, this is good, and stay there for 2 or 3 weeks. Make sure that you're there, and then take another baby step, rather than, and I think sometimes we get very excited when we see something good happening, like, oh, yay, I was able to, walk for 2 miles. Tomorrow I'm going to go on a hike. Like, that is a bit too big of a jump. Let's make sure that you can sustain whatever level of exercise that you're doing for 2 or 3 weeks before making any other changes. Because then you can also, you're your own guinea pig. You can really correlate, okay, if I did this, it got me to here. Let's make sure that I can stay here. And then I add another tiny piece of the puzzle. And it is frustrating because they're very tiny. And when you're doing a puzzle and it's 2,000 pieces and they're this big, it's very hard. But you can do it, and that will be worthwhile when it's all together. But again, I'm realistic. It's very hard to just say, okay, I have to just let this be the way it is, and then know what that next step is as well. So, and I'm happy to help with those kinds of things. But in my experience, people fail the most when they're trying to go too fast. And it's understandable. I'm the same way, but it is, you can't make sustainable changes if you're changing everything from one day to the next. I don't think it's realistic. But if you continue doing those kind of little things, I think you can do it. You'll get there. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your insight. I'm just trying to find the best approach. It's kind of like, and I had kind of forgotten about strength training. So thank you for bringing that up too.
Yes, and that is, especially in water aerobics, it's a fantastic way to build in strength training. And it is, if you can't do anything other than that, strength training is the single most important thing that I think, especially women can do in middle age and beyond, just because we are at such an increased risk of osteoporosis and breakages that it can't be avoided. It's not a thing that we can stick our head in the sand and pretend it's not happening. I have many people that come to me that after they've been diagnosed, and then it's not too late, obviously, because we can still work and we can prevent it from going any further, but you're already a step behind if you're already in that boat. So I do all I can to try to create awareness to saying that we have to find a way to make strength training part of your life, like forever. Not something you do for 12 weeks to change your body, but it has to be something that you do forever. And we can do it. We just say we have to think outside the box. It doesn't require you to do X, Y, Z. We can create whatever works for you. And that's really important.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Maria is still in her meeting, so we will miss her. Sweet Maria.
Aww.
I've actually been at 2 conventions with her trainings, so.
That's awesome. And Dr. Maria, what's the best way for someone to reach you?
Best way is to email me, maria@fitnessinmenopause.com. I try to be very responsive. It might take a day or two, especially on the weekends. I try to stay away from the computer, but during the week, I'm pretty good at responding within a day or two. And that's the best way. But if you want to follow, subscribe to my newsletter. If you go to fitnessinmenopause.com, that's my website. Subscribe to my newsletter. There's a lot of things going on currently. And I have a town hall coming up. If you subscribe to my newsletter, you will be invited to talk about sex in menopause. Very steamy conversation we will have about all the things that no one wants to talk about. So those are the 2 things that always, newsletter, that's how I give the best content through my newsletter, because I want to make sure that people that are interested in hearing are getting it. And I am on Instagram and Facebook, less active and less content because it just goes into the social media void. And I like to do the newsletter. So newsletter and email. But if you email me, we will get in contact for sure.
Sounds good. Well, that hour went by very fast. Thank you for very, very informative. Great information.
I'm glad. Yeah, I wasn't lying when I said I can talk about this forever.
A lot of good info. So thank you again for your time today. And yeah, this is being recorded and we'll get it up on YouTube as well, so others can listen in. So thank you again.
Thank you for coming.
Bye.